Hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao Ias Academy interview guidance program. So first of all, good evening, and today we will be discussing about PM Janman scheme. So before discussing this article, before discussing this new scheme that was introduced by the union government, we will try to understand, so what is PM Janman scheme? So what is the objective of PM Janman scheme? And what are the challenges in implementation of this PM Janman scheme, and what will be the way forward as well. So before discussing all these, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Okay, so why the PM Janman scheme is in news in recent times? Because now if you look at the union budget of 2024 and 25, this PM Janman scheme has also been mentioned in the union budget. So this was recently launched by the union government. So the total definition of PM Janman scheme is PM Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan. Okay, so what is a PM Janman scheme? It is PM Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan. So this scheme was launched for the purpose for the development of particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, so we have the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So there were tribal people, and within tribal people, the more backward communities within tribals are categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And this PM Janman program has been launched for the benefit of these particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now I will tell you a few characteristic features of particularly vulnerable tribal groups in this lecture itself, so that you will understand who are these particularly vulnerable tribal groups and how many categories of PVTGs are living in India, in different parts of India. So first understand, there are 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India. Okay, so earlier in UPSC prelims examination, there was also a question with respect to PVTGs. So please remember, there are 75 PVTGs living in various parts of the country. So out of these 705 scheduled tribes groups, okay, so out of 705 scheduled tribe groups, 75 are categorized as the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So these 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups spread over 18 states and one union territory. So that union territory is Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So please remember, there's only one union territory which does not have the scheduled tribe population. Okay, so so that is Chandigarh. Okay, so in this context, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, so they around 27.6 lakh as per the 2011 census. Okay, so there are 27.6 lakh particularly vulnerable tribal groups who are living in India. However, there are certain characteristics. So based on these characteristics, so PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, were identified. So one is the pre-agricultural level of technology. So while they practice agriculture, they will not use any technology, or the pre-agricultural level of technology, so that is used to define the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Apart from that, the low levels of literacy, so literacy rates are also lower, and the economic backwardness of the people of the PVTGs, and declining or stagnant population. So all these are the major characteristics of identifying or recognizing the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So please understand and also make note of all these characteristics of PVTGs. So they are very important. Okay. However, if you understand about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, so we need to talk about the few aspects. So first and foremost, a Deba commission that was appointed in the year 1973. So it created the primitive tribal groups. Okay, so there was no category called as particularly vulnerable tribal groups earlier. However, the Debar Commission in the year 1973 has created the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So that was recognized or identified as a separate category. Okay, so because they were a very less developed community or less developed group within the tribal people. So we have already discussed that out of 705 tribal groups, particularly vulnerable tribal groups are 75. So this particularly vulnerable tribal groups, so the government has renamed the primitive tribal groups as particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the year 2006. Okay, so in the year 2006, the primitive tribal groups were renamed as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So who have called the primitive tribal groups? The Debar Commission in the year 1973. So however, it has a certain features. The particularly vulnerable tribal groups have certain features. So what are those features? So they are mostly homogeneous in nature. So homogeneous in the sense that most of the people have similar characteristics, similar features. So they are considered as homogeneous people, and the particularly vulnerable tribal groups do not have the large population. Rather, they are having a very small population and located in a one particular region. Okay, so they are also physically isolated, that in the sense that they are not in contact with the physical world similar to other tribal groups, or they are less in contact with the outside world or any other group of people. So therefore we can say that they are physically isolated relatively, and they have their own social institutions, social customs. Okay, so they have the different traditions, different customs, different cultures of their own, and in fact they do not have any written language. Okay, so they do not have any written language, no script at all. So they use a relatively very simple technology whenever it comes to the agriculture or any way, thing with respect to the their life. And they also have a slower rate of change, so they would not change rapidly. Okay, so I can say that they are relatively less developed, backward, and they do have a very poor infrastructure, and and other provisions that the government has been providing for other categories of the people. And these are the major features of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now, as I have already told you that 75 groups among the tribals are categorized as particular vulnerable tribal groups. So out of these 75, highest number of PVTGs are living in Odisha. So around 13 PVTGs are living in Odisha itself, and that is followed by Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so Odisha has 13 PVTGs and Andhra Pradesh has 12 PVTGs. Okay, so if you look at Chhattisgarh, it has 7 PVTGs. So the name of PVTGs in Chhattisgarh include Kamar, Baiga, Pahadi Korba, and Abuj Madia, Birhor, Pando, and Buzia. Okay, so recently this Baiga tribe is also in news. Why it is in news? One woman or entire Baiga tribe from Madhya Pradesh, they have started cultivating the pulses. So that has become a very important case study, and one woman from the Baiga tribe from Madhya Pradesh was invited to the G20 summit to give a lecture on the cultivation of pulses, or the success story of cultivation of pulses. So the Baiga tribe was also a particularly vulnerable tribal group, and please remember, UPSC has directly asked that Baiga tribe is a particularly vulnerable tribal group. Okay, so because of this reason, you should also have a basic idea that who are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So in this context, we will understand what is this PM Janman Yojana scheme. So what exactly is this PM Janman Yojana scheme? So this particular scheme, that is PM Janman Yojana. So this scheme was launched on the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas. So this was celebrated on the birth anniversary of Birsa Munda. He is from Jharkhand. Birsa Munda, he was from Jharkhand. right? So Janjatiya Gaurav Divas means this is like a tribal day that is being celebrated in commemoration or in remembrance of Birsa Munda, and he was from Jharkhand. So however, this PM Janman has a certain objective. So what is the objective of this particular program? So it will provide essential amenities. So essential amenities in the sense that provides road, telecom connectivity, electricity for the people, and secure housing, clean drinking water, sanitation. So all these facilities would be provided by the government under PM Janman Yojana. So if you remember that are a vulnerable group of people. Okay, so they are considered as less developed and backward. So they lack access to all these facilities: road, telecom connectivity, electricity, secure housing, clean drinking water. So therefore, this scheme will provide a basic provision of all these facilities, all these amenities. So that includes sustainable livelihood opportunities, nutrition, education, healthcare access. Okay, so therefore, they are now considered as relatively less developed, and providing all the amenities, all the facilities, there would be a positive change in the lives of these people. So apart from that, we need to talk about the awareness generation element as well. Okay, so the government will certainly showcase and spread awareness of various government schemes that were launched for the benefit of these particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So therefore, they can best use these welfare programs for their benefit, for their development. So the coordinating role. Okay, so as of now, this scheme will be implemented by the 9 ministries, with Ministry of Tribal Affairs will play a very important role. Okay, so PM Janman Yojana will be implemented by 9 ministries. However, the most important role would be played by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. So who are the beneficiaries of this program? So the government has identified 75 tribal communities, as I have already told you, and these 75 tribal communities are categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So they have the population of 27 lakh around, and around 22,000 villages across the country. Right, so this is about the PM Janman Yojana. However, this particular program will focus on 11 critical interventions, so that we have already discussed. Okay, so firstly, providing a basic housing. Okay, so this scheme has said that will provide 4.90 lakh Pakka homes for the people, and after that we need to talk about the connectivity aspect as well. So it will connect 8,000 kilometers of Pakka roads with 1 crore per kilometer spending, and it will also install mobile towers for the greater connectivity of the people and reduce their physical isolation from the mainstream society. So after that, the drinking water supply would also be provided for the people, for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, so when they do not have access to the safe drinking water, so they would be vulnerable to several waterborne diseases, and that would lead to the mortality and declining population of these tribal groups. So therefore, the government would also enhance the access to drinking water supply to these tribal groups, and the community water supply would also be provided in around 2,500 villages, habitations with a population of less than 20 households. So Bandhan Vikas Kendras, so this scheme was particularly with the focus of self-help group women in these particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So these self-help group women would collect the minor forest produce. So minor forest produce in the sense it includes honey, tamarind and gum, pidi leaves. So all these things would be collected by these self-help group women based associations. So they will be adequately trained and will provide adequate information, working capital and marketing support. So that will add significant value to the products when they sell, and it is also helps them earn a sustainable livelihood from this Bandhan Vikas Kendras. So hostel facility will be provided for the youth or students who will be educated, and health infrastructure, around 1,000 mobile medical units. So these medical units are not located physically in one particular place, so rather they are mobile medical units. So they are spread across 10 districts. So education and training would also be given. Okay, so it provides vocational education and skilling centers in 60 aspirational particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So after that we need to talk about the infrastructure, the element of infrastructure as well. Okay, so Anganwadi centers would be constructed as part of the integrated child development services. And apart from Anganwadis, so we can also see the role of ANMs, ASHA workers. So they spread awareness about the immunization, nutrition, and even providing basic health related information to pregnant as well as lactating mothers. So we should also talk about the renewable energy aspect as well. It provides solar off-grid system and solar lighting in the streets, and electricity also. So because the government has been planning to connect every household with the electricity, so we have almost achieved the 100% coverage of the electricity. So the last mile electricity coverage to around 57,000 households. So I can say that this particular program will ensure the all-round development. This will ensure the all-round development or holistic development of PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So in this context, there are certain challenges that the government and the implementing bodies will face while implementing this particular program. So what are those challenges? So we do not have the adequate data with respect to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, in which regions they are located, and what are the problems they have been facing, and what is the population of different particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So therefore we need to have a solid and robust data, and that would facilitate the data driven decision making as well as evidence based decision making that could have a lot of positive implications on the development of this particularly vulnerable tribal groups. After that, we need to talk about implementation of these schemes in a transparent manner. Okay, so the current project is going ahead with a baseline service, but results are not made public. So therefore the government should make the results of these particular schemes to the public. So therefore the public assessment and the public scrutiny over these schemes would also be done. And the accountability aspect, because we have already discussed that around 9 ministries are involved in this particular program, with Ministry of Tribal Affairs will play the key role. So therefore, since it has been involving multiple ministries, there are issue of overlapping or conflicting the mandate, and there will be gaps in service delivery also. So therefore this aspect should also be kept in mind while implementing this particular program. So each of these ministries would have a clear roles and responsibilities, and there should not be any confusion. Okay, so after that, the ecological diversity aspect. So there are some interventions such as road construction, so they may affect the availability and quality of the natural resources. So infrastructure development in those areas may have the negative implications on the ecology and the environment, because most of these PVTGs are isolated and most of the habitations are located in the thick forest areas. So therefore we should also do the proper environmental impact assessment before undertaking any project, so which could have negative implications on the people as well as the environment where the PVTGs are living. Okay, so we should also think about the cultural heritage that these PVTGs already have. So there may be chances that if they are more educated and provided more healthcare facilities, so they also have the traditional healthcare practices, traditional healing practices, and they also have the traditional education, they also have a traditional knowledge. So we need to provide education and healthcare along with conserving the traditional knowledge of these PVTGs, and that is very important for the overall development and holistic development of these PVTGs. Okay, so I hope you have the basic understanding of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So all these challenges are very important when you write the mains answer, and even if you answer any question in the interview about the PVTGs. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you.